Welcome to Voices Against Violence, a dedicated space to educate, empower, and serve as a voice for all survivors. Our goal is to provide an extensive range of resources and content that not only informs, but also inspires action and advocacy. Join us as we work together to create a supportive community, drive change, and ensure that every survivor's story is heard. Today, I am joined by someone very special, Joy Martin, who is a domestic violence survivor and also a domestic violence advocate. She sits on the Greene County Domestic Violence Board and is a mother to an amazing 15-year-old who she says is her everything. Joy, so excited to have you with us today.
Thanks for having me.
So you are on the Greene County Domestic Violence Board. Tell me a little bit about that. What does that board do?
The Greene County Domestic Violence Board manages the money that we give to the domestic violence shelters here in Springfield.
Okay. You also sit on the Voices Committee,
Yes.
which is part of the Greene County Family Justice Center.
Yes.
Can you briefly explain maybe what a Family Justice Center is? Because I know there are a lot of folks in the community who don't even know that we have a Family Justice Center.
Yes.
But also, what do they do? And then what is the Voices Committee?
So the Greene County Domestic Violence, the Family Justice Center, they're like a one-stop shop. They have advocates from Harmony House there, police office there as well. So if someone is leaving that type of situation, they don't have to travel around everywhere. They can go to one place. And I know for me, when I left, I had to go to the courthouse. I had to do this. I had to do this. And instead of just being able to have one place, it would have been much easier if I'd had that one place to go to.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the Voices Committee, we're a domestic violence education advocacy group. We work with legislation. Some of us go to Jefferson City sometimes to speak to lawmakers there. I think a couple of us have also gone to Washington, D.C. a couple of times.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I have not, but we also do things like this or other domestic violence fundraisers, different things like that to speak. Or even I know some of the ladies have gone to like the law enforcement to educate
Mm-hmm.
law enforcement officers as well.
That's amazing. I knew that you all sometimes went to Jeff City. I didn't know that you also sometimes went to DC. So you're doing major advocacy
Yes.
On behalf of domestic violence survivors.
Yes,
You are a survivor yourself.
I am.
Everyone's story is different. Their journey is different. Before we get into your story, I am curious, what made you decide, okay, I want to be on the Voices Committee and I want to publicly tell my story? Because not every survivor feels comfortable doing that.
Right. First and foremost, I'm a Christian, and I felt like I really had this laid on my heart that the best way to move past and to make the bad things that happened to me mean something was to share my story. And I've had so many opportunities opened up for me with that. I share it on social media a lot, and it never fails that somebody reaches out every time I do that needs help.
All right, so let's get into it. I will say for folks who are watching, we are going to be talking about domestic violence. Joy's going to be sharing her story. So feel free to, as you're watching this, listening to it, wherever you're finding the podcast, you might need to take a break. I know sometimes when I am watching or listening to something that's pretty heavy, like I need to take a break and come back to it. So I always want to give that disclaimer.
Absolutely.
When we're talking about some really hard topics.
Yeah.
Joy, what's your story?
I grew up in a really good home. Both my parents are still married. I was kind of a quiet person, pretty introverted. And in my late 20s, early 30s, I got to a point in my life where I'd kind of unintentionally isolated myself from everybody, was in a very, very lonely spot. And I met this guy that he just was a lot of what I was looking for. Granted, looking back now, there was a lot of red flags and things he did that at the time I didn't realize were definitely abuser tactics.
Mhm.
It's like they all come read the same book or something. Um, but I got in the situation. We were about 3 months into our relationship, and I found out I was pregnant. And I always had been one of these people. If I ever was not married, I would not stay with that person just because I was pregnant. But then that really changes when you actually are in
Yes.
the situation.
Mhm.
Um, he is very much a narcissistic personality and manipulative and love to use this. Well, my family's never supported me. My mom even never has supported. And so to me, as a fixer personality, was like, well, then I'm going to doggone it. I'll be that person that will never
Ooh,
leave. And
yes.
um, it just, yeah, things kind of happened a lot. He also had a lot of drug issues. So that was another thing that we dealt with a lot.
Mhm.
Um, we moved a lot. He always was, well, if we move, then things will be better. If we get married, things will be better. Come to find out, he had been cheating on me the whole time we were together. Um, every once in a while, he'd get really guilty about it and tell me about it, so I'd forgive him. So, according to his mind, everything was slate was wiped clean. He was not very much a physical abuser. It was more mental, emotional, financial. Um, but to be honest, I would have rather him be a physical abuser because I could have healed from that.
Mm.
Mental abuse, it gets stuck in your head and it's so
Mhm.
hard. There are still to this day, and I mean, it's been 12 years, 13 years now. There's still some times where things he said to me, words he spoke over me. Words are so powerful. You
Yeah.
really have to be careful with what
Mhm.
you say to people because they can really get stuck in your head. Um, One of the worst things he ever did was um, we'd just gone to bed and things had been okay at the time, but maybe not so much. He had quit drinking for a while, but he had started drinking again. And he literally wrapped his arms around me and he leaned over and he whispered in my ear, if I put this pillow over your head and killed you right now, no one would ever know what happened. And I was frozen, and then I tried to get up, like, away, and he was like, "What are you trying to get up for?" He wouldn't let me get away from him, and, like, so I just had to, like, lay there, like, literally frozen,
Wow.
terrified of him. It was that kinda stuff, like, he rarely ever touched me, but it was just this mental, like, "You can't get away from me"
Mhm. I feel
stuff.
like that's almost more damaging, more harmful
Yes.
because it's the threat
Yes.
that he's planting that seed that
Mhm.
it, like he doesn't even have to. He can do it with his words
Yeah.
and know that if I wanted to, I could.
Yes. Yeah.
I want to circle back to the beginning of your story. You
Mhm.
said you came from a good home.
Yes.
One of the things that I hear a lot when I'm out in the community is that, oh, it's because they grew, women grew
Mhm.
up in a home where there was abuse. And certainly that does happen. I mean, the generational cycle of abuse, that is a thing.
Absolutely.
But did you grow up in a home where there was
No.
abuse?
No, definitely not. My parents both loved me. I mean, we were homeschooled. It wasn't like we were out running around doing stuff. We were always in church. I mean, it wasn't like there was all of those things. I was lonely.
Mm-hmm.
And at a point where I was like, you know what? I just basically threw caution to the wind.
Mm-hmm.
So,
What is so fascinating to me about your story is that I think your story busts a lot of the myths
Mhm.
that the average person has about someone who
Mhm.
experiences domestic violence, which is that they're in poverty, they grew up in a home with abuse, maybe they're not educated, and none of those things are the case for you. And
No,
so I think it really, we say all the time on the podcast that anyone
absolutely.
can be abused. This happens, can happen to anyone.
Well, and that to me is a huge issue because people only focus on the poverty and the former abuse. They don't realize, and it puts a stigma on people that may be in a wealthy household, an
Mm-hmm.
educated person, because then people look at them, well, you've got all this education. How could you be that dumb? You know,
Mm-hmm.
how could you fall for something like that? And
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't really matter. It's you don't you don't realize you're in that situation till you're in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
If someone would have told me a couple years before all of that happened, that's where I would be. I would have been like, I would never let myself be in that
Mm-hmm.
situation. But when you're in it, it just happens.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I hear people say that a lot that, oh, if it were me, I would never put up with that.
No,
But really, you don't know
no.
what you would do or how you would respond until you're in that situation.
Yep.
You talked about knowing, recognizing that there were some red flags kind of in hindsight.
Mhm.
Looking back, what were some of those red flags?
Well, he did within the first couple of months we were together. Um, he all of a sudden just packed up some of his stuff and disappeared for a bit. And then came back and did the whole love bombing thing. And so that actually, from a lot of research I have done, is very typical of people that are abusers. They will leave and make you so desperate for, oh my gosh, what did I do? And then they
Mm,
come back and they, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I love you. I'm sorry I did that. I had to figure out some things for myself. And then because you're trying to fix whatever you think in your head you did to make that situation happen, you're like, okay, I will let you back in. Let's try to make this work out.
mm.
So,
Someone said recently, maybe on another episode of the podcast, that it was our agency therapist actually, and she said the tactics that abusers use might be different. Like they all, they're doing,
mhm,
but the pattern is the
very
same.
much same.
And so doing something harmful. So in your case, like he just packed it. Like, was there any explanation of like,
He
did you
just
know where
needed
he
to
was or?
no, he just needed to figure some things out.
So he disappeared. So you're
Yes.
left wondering, like, what's going on? What's happening to this relationship? And then he comes back and loves bomb you.
Mhm,
So there's the honeymoon phase. And so that pattern
mhm.
is pretty much universal. Something harmful, then they come back, they apologize, you have the honeymoon phase. And okay, so what were some other red flags? Were there some things that maybe looking back, wouldn't have thought it was a warning sign, but in hindsight, you're like, no, that actually was a.
Yeah, I mean, he always felt like he had to be in control of the money after
Mm.
although he never worked, because has caught some felonies when he was younger. They won't let me have a job, I can't have this, whatever. And so it was all just making me feel like I had to be the one to fix everything and take
Mm-hmm.
care of everything. Um, and then once I had our son, then he was because we were married by then, the state wouldn't allow me to file for child support help because we were married and I was working, then he was considered the caregiver. So I had to leave our son with him. Um, and he would always tell me, well, you went out and spent $100 buying groceries and stuff for the house. I deserve $100 for babysitting fees. Um, so yeah, I love it when people say they're babysitting their own child. Um,
Right?
that's
It's not
like,
babysitting when it's your own
no,
child.
it's definitely not. But just stuff like that. He would leave. Like I said, he had some drug problems and he would leave and then he would come back and he would always, again, every time he did something or even the cheating part, he would tell me and then everything would be okay. I'd forgive him. It just was a lot of those. Um, if he got angry, I remember one time we got into it really bad, and that was one time he did put his hands on me. It was very few times, but that one time, and we finally went our separate ways for a minute, and then he came back in the room and was like, if you hadn't have pushed my buttons, I wouldn't have gotten mad.
Mm.
So trying to put all of the what had happened to me back on me because I had made him upset.
Which is a common tactic, Darvo, denying responsibility and then reversing who the offender is. So, he wasn't responsible. It was your fault.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. So you said, there was a little bit of physicality,
Yeah.
but it was mostly mental, emotional, financial. I know some folks think, well, if he wasn't hitting, and I've heard folks say this, well, if he wasn't hitting you, then what was, why couldn't you get out? Can you briefly, I feel like we could do a whole episode just about emotional abuse, but
Yes.
I wonder if you could help those folks understand exactly what that emotional abuse, how that plays on survivors, how that impacts you.
Well, you remember the negative things that are said to you. One person can say one negative thing to you where 10 other people constantly are telling you the positive things, and you'll remember that one negative thing. But just yesterday, I was on Facebook, and this person who I follow that's an amazing pastry chef had 2 people comment on something negative, and she was torn up about it. When there's hundreds of people that are constantly saying positive things. I mean, it's the same thing with everybody. You remember the negative things that are said to you way, way more than. That's why I'm so careful what I say to my child about anything, because I know that anything negative, he'll remember way more than anything positive I say. Unfortunately, that's just the way our brains work.
We are going to take a pause right there. We're going to take a break, and we're going to come back. And joining us will be Kate Reyes-Sam, another survivor who's also on the Voices Committee, who will be sharing her story. And so sit tight. Welcome back to the Voices Against Violence podcast. Joining us now is Kate Reyes-Sam. Kate is a survivor of domestic violence and sexual assault and currently chairs the Voices Committee at the Greene County Family Justice Center. She currently lives in the Ozarks with her family and works for a national nonprofit. And I happen to know that she is just an amazing, incredible human. So privileged that you're able to join us on the podcast, Kate.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be here with you and Joy.
So in the previous segment, Joy was sharing a little bit about her story. You're a survivor. What's your story, Kate?
Yes, my story. Well, like a lot of other people that live here in the Ozarks, while I wasn't born here, I grew up here. I'm a product of Springfield Public Schools. I graduated from Drury University with both my bachelor's and master's. And like so many other people in this community, I'm also a survivor of domestic violence. And my relationship actually began outside of Springfield because I had moved to the St. Louis area. And so I'd met that person there and initially thought this was like the kindest, most loving, most generous person I had ever met. And slowly certain other things started to creep in that I just was not very aware of being like those common red flags, looking back retroactively, now I say, gosh, it seems like they have a playbook. Like abusers seem to often do the same thing.
That is exactly what you said,
Yes.
Joy. She's like, it's like they've read all this. They've all read the same book.
It is astonishing because when you're going through it, it is such an isolating experience. So I felt like very ashamed, very embarrassed, very trapped. And a lot of that had to do with that isolation. And so it is really astonishing on the other side when you realize that other people who have been in these situations often go through very similar circumstances. So after being in a relationship with that person for some time, I had a job opportunity in Texas. So they moved with me to Texas, which isolated me from my friends and family. And so things began to get worse. I married that person, things got worse. And then eventually I became pregnant, and things really hit a climax during my pregnancy and shortly after my child was born. And so I knew probably within about a month of my child being born that I would need to leave, which was a really daunting prospect as a first-time mom with a newborn, as a breastfeeding mom. And somehow,
Okay, wait a minute. Did you just say a month after you'd had your child?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
So you were a new mom
Yes.
with a newborn infant
Yes.
breastfeeding, and you realized at that time
Yes. On my
You-
maternity leave.
you would need to get out.
Yes. Yes. It was very daunting trying to figure out, well, where do I even begin? And so it led me at that time to an agency that's very similar to Harmony House, but in Texas, called Mujeres Unidas, or Women Together. And that's when they showed me the wheel of
The power and control wheel.
Yes. And that stopped me dead in my tracks. I knew right then and there that I was a victim, a survivor of abuse, because what I said to that advocate was, everything on here he's doing to me. He's doing everything. Even things that to other people may seem somewhat more trivial, like torturing my pet, locking me out of the
That's
house.
not trivial, though.
Yeah. I mean, so it says, if I understand, but in comparison
Yeah.
to some other aspects, I understand people might say, well, that's not the biggest deal, but it is, because it is a comprehensive attack on your humanity. It isn't just simply, the physical abuse or the emotional abuse. It is, I've yet to meet a survivor who says, well, they only do this and they don't do anything else. It is a very comprehensive attack on your ability to be a person with dignity, to have a person with independent thought. And so, right around 3 months, I got an ex parte for my baby and I, and we left. The divorce took about a year. And as soon as the divorce was finalized, then I was able to move back here to be close to family. And then we were left alone for about a year. And then that person started to behave again in a very abusive manner. And so then we had to go back to court again, had to do a modification case. So as it stands today, I have sole physical and legal custody of my child.
Wow. I mean, I kind of can't believe that I am sitting between these two beautiful people. And I think if I had experienced even a fraction of what you have, I don't know, like, you're fully clothed with all of the hair on your, you know what I'm saying? Like, so the work that I'm sure it must have taken for you to get to this point and even be able to talk about your story. You did say a couple of things that I want to go back to, feeling very isolating. And I feel like we can't say this enough, and one of the big questions that I get when I'm out in the community is, how common is it? 1 in 3 women, 1 in 4 men. And that holds true right here in Greene County. So, if you're thinking, and I hear people say this all the time, like, oh, I don't know anyone. Yes, you do. If you know 3 women, you know a survivor. So it's super common. I said to Joy, I feel like she breaks the mold on a lot of the, I think what most people think is the typical abused woman. She came from a good home. She was educated. They went to church, and same with you, So again, really illustrates that this can happen to anyone. You're both incredibly intelligent people. Because I heard someone say, well, if only they were just smart enough to get out. And it's like, no, that's not what it's about. I'm curious, Joy, if we can go back to you for a second. When did you know you needed to get out?
My son was almost 3, and my ex had started really using meth very heavily. I'm not even going to get into all of that because that was very scary. But I got home from work one day, and again, because I couldn't get childcare assistance. He had to stay home with him. I came home one day. He was acting slightly out of character. He already had my son ready for bed, which was rather odd. Um, but the next morning, I didn't have to work. And so I got up to give my son a bath. And when I put him in the bathtub, I noticed bruises all down from like his waist down. And they didn't look like handprints. I'm still not sure what he had been hit with. At that point, my ex woke up and saw us, and he flipped out because, according to him, in his words, I was making him feel more guilty than he already did for what he did. And at that point, and then he disappeared for about 24 hours. He went on a drug binge and stuff. And my ex's sister came over to take our son for a overnight. And I had to tell her because I couldn't not tell her. And she looked at me and said, "How long are you going to keep dealing with him being this way?" And it just, I don't know why, because other people had said that to me before, but just at that point, it finally clicked in my head. And I was like, okay. So I called my mom, and my mom was going to come over. We were just going to go to Walmart and change the lock so he couldn't get back in. But he came back before my mom got there, and he looked me dead in the face when I told him I can't do this anymore. And he said, "Well, then I will just go to the police and tell them you did it." And I said, because he blamed me for everything all the time. I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he goes, "Well, our son's not old enough to tell them what really happened, so I'll just go to tell them you did it." And I was like, no, that is not going to happen. And so my mom got there and picked me up, and we went to the police. I turned him in. I had to take my son to the hospital to have a full body x-ray, and literally the worst night of my life. Like, I sat there while they were trying to hold him down so they could get their x-rays, and he was bawling because, I mean, he was 2. But you talking about that circle, like when I went to file the ex parte, it was actually in the room where I was at filling all that paperwork out. And that's when it hit me as well. Like, I started looking at it and I was like, oh my word. Like like I knew things weren't right, obviously. But that's when it hit me how deep everything was.
So both Kate and Joy, they're referring to the power and control wheel. So if you are unfamiliar with that, just Google it. Just type in power and control wheel, and you will see, so many results, so many different nonprofits, universities, shelters, have their own version of that. There's one for elder abuse. There's one for teen dating violence. So I think that's a really great tool, especially if you're concerned about someone or think you might be in this situation yourself. Power and control wheel. Look it up, and you can see. One other thing, Kate, that you said that really kind of stood out to me is that it sounds like it escalated once you got pregnant and had the baby. And so that's another common thing that we know. The 2 most dangerous times for survivors are when they're trying to leave or when they get pregnant.
Yes.
As someone who was in that situation, help folks who maybe don't have a frame of reference for that. Why would being pregnant, having a baby, why would things escalate at that time?
Sure. Well, just by becoming a parent, you automatically have a lifestyle change. So my ability in many regards to leave the house, to go to work, to go to the store was much more limited, both physically as I was, pregnant and then after birth, but also because, what reason would you have to go out late at night? What reason would you have to go out on the weekend? So the ability for me, for example, to go to the police station and to create an incident report so that I would have a paper trail of what he had done was much more limited. I would have to be very careful about how I did it. The other thing is that, so much of his behaviors, a lot of times I think people think of abusers as like, well, they just need like anger management, like he just lashed out and couldn't control it. Retroactively, I would say from looking at the situation, he was very much in control, going back to a wheel of power and control. So when we were out in public, his behavior was very different. And then when we were at home, where I had less ability to get help, his behavior was very dangerous. And so every aspect of the abuse heightened, and my ability to protect myself physically or in any other way was limited because I was pregnant or had just given birth.
What was one of the earliest red flags looking back?
When I was pregnant, you mean?
Just like in that relationship, like
Oh, in the relationship. Yeah. I remember because we were still living in the St. Louis area at the time, and I love going to St. Louis Cardinals games, super fun. And so we were dating, and things seemed to be going so remarkably well. We decided to go to a Cardinals game together. And I remember we had maybe one beer at the game, and I was just joking about something. I can't even tell you what it was. It was so unremarkable to me. And he became so angry at me that he refused to talk to me for the rest of the baseball game, refused to talk to me after the game, and wouldn't talk to me until the next day. And I can't even tell you, like, even when he eventually talked to me again, he didn't say like specifically what I said. He was like, "You were just extremely disrespectful. You can't talk to me like that."
my God.
Yes. So that was something that definitely exacerbated over time. So like eventually when we were married and I had a baby, he would lock me out of the house, and I lived in South Texas, and this was in the summer. So the temperature was around like 110 degrees every day. And when he would lock me out of the house, when he would finally let me come back and talk to me, he would say, "Well, you deserved it because you were disrespectful to me."
We could spend a good hour with each of you and your respective stories. But unfortunately, we don't have time. But I do want to kind of shift the conversation to another aspect of this. You're both parents. You were parents in your situations. Can you help us understand what it's like parenting while in that situation?
For me, there were so many times where, like, in the back of my head, but it also exacerbated the guilt of, I'm letting my child see me treated this way. I don't want my child to think that it's okay to be this way growing up, but then I don't want to leave. I mean, there was so many of those things, but just also trying to protect my child as well from that.
Yes, it is incredibly challenging. I would say that my child is the main reason why I left and the hardest part of leaving. The main reason I left because I felt like, at least to some degree, I could try to stand up for myself to him. Whereas my child was an infant, what could my child possibly do? And to already see the ways in which he was controlling and treating my child as nothing more than like an object or a possession of his was so deeply hurtful. But yet, when I decided I wanted to leave, and I went and consulted with many different attorneys, immediately, because there is a child involved, the retainer you have to pay the attorney to secure their services doubles. So
I guess because it's going to be more work now because
Yes.
custody is now a part of it. And so,
yes,
Okay.
yes. And also, in many municipalities, and as I understand it as well, is quite common here in Greene County, it's very difficult to get an ex parte or a protective order for a child. Very, very, very difficult. Even in my case, where there was a protective order for myself and my child, the protective order was essentially suspended 3 hours a week for that person to have visitation with the child, which is just sort of mind-boggling, right?
Okay. So I want to just take a moment, and I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this, but I wonder if both of you can speak to this, because I know there are folks and judges, folks in our criminal justice and legal systems who think just because someone is an abuser doesn't mean that they are a bad parent. Like, I guess I don't even know what my question is really. Like, what would you say to that? I mean, I guess, there is that idea that if the child isn't being physically harmed, and in your case, your child was, but that, just because you're being abused doesn't mean your child is. So they're still okay. They deserve to have a relationship with that parent. What's your thought on that? What would you say?
Well, for me, she probably has a better answer than I do, because for me, my ex, I didn't know this when most of the time we were together, but he's a sex offender. And so there was also some other issues. So, but they wouldn't give me the ex parte. They just gave it to me for me, not for my child. That got wrapped up in the divorce case. But it was a little easier on my side because of his past as well. But still, he loved to try to come into the court and rehash all the times he had tried to see his child, that I wouldn't let him see his child. I mean, it was at least once a month that I had to go to the courthouse and talk to them about it.
Yes, I would say, if you look for the qualifications of anybody who has to be in the position of being responsible for a child, a babysitter, a teacher, we do criminal background checks, FBI checks, fingerprinting, the whole gambit. So you're telling me that somebody could be an abuser, could be, in a criminal, and yet have access to a child in an incredibly intimate, personal way. It is completely illogical. It's what I would call mental gymnastics. Besides the fact that if that child's primary caregiver is the survivor or the victim, and that survivor or victim is being assaulted in every conceivable way, that has a direct impact on their ability to be the parent that child needs them to be. Not because the victim or survivor is not a good parent, because any human being would struggle to function when they are being assaulted in every conceivable way. So it doesn't make sense in that regard. And again, we go back to lots of different tropes or ideas about what abusers are or are not. Oftentimes it's the idea that they're out of control. They just need anger management. They just need to learn how to emotionally regulate. It's so much more complicated than that. And it really is an intention. It is an intention to control another human being in every way that they possibly can, and any threat to that will increase their behavior. So trying to parent with somebody like that, even the idea of like trying to go to like mediation. Okay, let's try to come to a mediated settlement. How do you come to a compromise with someone who believes they've never done anything wrong and that everything is your fault? I mean,
it's true. To this day, he still doesn't believe, even though he has the parenting plan, that the parenting plan is valid or our divorce is valid.
That tracks. that tracks.
To this day.
Well, and even in my case, while there
I don't even know what to say to that. Like, that's
while there was no criminal conviction, I found out after having my child that the person that I had married was, long before I met them, arrested and in jail because they were credibly accused of statutory rape. And essentially what that person says is I was exonerated because that underage girl did not feel comfortable going to court and pursuing, which oftentimes is what happens. So then the charges are dropped. That doesn't mean that didn't happen. So in my case, that person also had a history of doing really inappropriate things with underage people. But there was no criminal conviction, so there was nothing I could do about it.
That's interesting that piece is in the background of both of
Hmm.
your abusers, which I think further illustrates that this is a choice that an abuser makes
Hmm.
to have power and control. Um, so domestic violence, but also sexual violence. It's not about the sex act. It is really about exerting their control over another person. You both have been out of your situations now for years. I'm wondering, after you got out, how do you how do you begin to put your life back together, especially as a parent? What does parenting after getting out of a domestic violence situation look like, especially in the beginning?
It's a lot of needed grace. I There's times that I respond to situations, things my child may say, and I've always taken the line of being as honest and as age appropriately as possible with him. So we've had some conversations that probably are not easy to talk through, but I've had to say, um, I'm sorry I reacted to you this way. We've had to have some of those type of conversations, and I've had to tell him, well, this is why. It's nothing to do with because you're that person's child. It's just that I have these response mechanisms ingrained in my head now, and you have to give your mom some grace. I'm doing the best I can. And, we've had lots of those conversations.
That sounds very relatable. Though my child is younger than your child, I think it was really hard in the beginning because, again, I was a first time parent with an infant who lives states away from my family. So trying to figure out how to be a parent to a newborn, and navigate a divorce from, I don't like to toss this term around, but I think it is appropriate, a malignant narcissist, was really, really difficult. Um, I would say that I just tried to immerse myself in places that I felt like I could feel safe, where I could build trust. So things as simple as like taking my child regularly to like library play dates, establishing activities that I could do with my child, like mommy and me swim classes. And then as my child got older, seeking out supports that I felt were right for them. Because initially, what I was often told was like, well, all those things happen when your child were really little. So, like, that doesn't matter. They don't remember them. But I felt in my gut as a parent that that was not true based on things that I was seeing. And so finally, I was able to find care providers in this community through Burrell, through Arc of the Ozarks, and a few other places that understood that when abuse happens while you're pregnant, when abuse happens while a child is an infant or a toddler, it is incredibly impactful because their brain is developing at that time. And so, the regular pace of their brain rhythm is used to a certain kind of chaos. And so since then, my child has been diagnosed with PTSD, among other diagnoses, and is now in many different therapies. And so, now it's not just figuring out what does it mean for me to be a survivor and thrive, but it's also now what does it mean to parent a child who is a survivor, who doesn't have clear memories of what happened, but certainly that trauma lives in her body, and is neurodivergent as well. So, I have to take on the responsibility of not only making sure that my child goes to all their therapy appointments and takes their medication and gets everything they need, but I do all of that without any support from that other individual, the person I was married to. So they do not provide any sort of financial support, no medical support, nothing. So there's a lot of responsibility on my shoulders to make sure that my child has everything they deserve because my child did nothing to ask for what happened to them.
I think you brought up some really good points there. That even a child who maybe is too young to remember what happened or to verbalize what's happening, even at those really young ages, kids pick up on the environment in the house and the trauma
Mhm.
and the stress the impact that has on them can stay with them for the rest of their lives. I mean, we know that does impact cognitive development. Um, so, I mean, that's such an important point. I wonder if, as parents, you can speak to how you convey to your children, like how do you break that cycle? I mean, part of breaking that cycle was, your children have witnessed you
Mhm.
getting out and you're safe and happy and healthy now, but also how do you help your child process that, because you don't want them to grow up to be abusers, you don't want them to grow up to be in abusive relationships. What do those conversations look like to help your child process this?
For me, because I know my ex's family history back, I've been very intentional with my child of exposing them to um, people that are in recovery for drug use, because that is like 4 generations back that I know. If my child makes it to adulthood without a drug or alcohol problem, he'll be the first man in 4 generations on his father's side. That
Oh
yeah. So I mean,
my.
it's a
You're
major.
breaking multiple cycles
Yes,
here.
yeah.
Oh my
I
God.
mean, it's back generations, the abuse, the drug, the alcohol. So, like, literally, if my child makes it, actually, he's older now, right now at 15, than anybody else, like for 4 generations back. So he's already past that.
Oh my God.
So,
Snaps to him. Good
yeah,
for you.
yeah.
That's
So,
amazing.
but talking to him, exposing him to that, we go to a church that does a lot of sober living ministry. We're really involved with Victory Mission. He has a lot of his buddies that have been down that road, have been through the drugs, the alcohol, the prison time, and reiterating to him all the time, this is where this ends up. I like you don't want to play around with it, because this is where it ends up. Unfortunately, because they say that it's genetics, part of it that plays into addiction, letting him understand that, hey, this is in your genes. Be careful with this. Just don't even mess with it, because you don't want to get to that point.
Mm-hmm.
We've had lots of conversations about stuff like that.
Wow.
Wow. That's incredible, Joy.
It
Just had to
really
say that.
is.
You just
And
said
you're
it
raising
amazing.
an incredible young person.
Yes,
I mean,
absolutely. Absolutely.
wow.
Yes. It's hard to follow that up. What I'll say is that, in my family, I think, because I am remarried and I have another child, I think we really just try to focus on what good parenting is, because good parenting should be the same no matter your circumstances. And so one thing that's very big for me is what we call a culture of consent. And I learned that through a professional development workshop I had back in 2020. But essentially, a culture of consent is something that folks are fully informed, that they can take back at any time. They can adjust what they feel about it at any time. And there's also something to be said about enthusiastic consent.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the difference between being like, oh, yeah, I guess I'll go to that movie with you, or like, yeah, I can't wait to go to that movie with you. So trying to teach those things to my children young, simply with things like, people don't have to give a hug if they don't want to. People don't have to give a kiss or hold hands, or like, you don't owe anybody any part of your body at any time. So even with us as parents, I don't think my children owe me a hug or a kiss or even an I love you. I have to earn that from them. And so, those are things that I try to model with my husband now. And I feel like it's just such a refreshing place to be at as a human being, to be in a home where we know that, and where we can say like, nope, we're not going to be touching right now. Or even I can say, hey, mom's overstimulated. I've been working all day. I've been doing this and this. I need space where I'm not touched, So things like that I think are really important. And then also, my child is younger than Joy, so the conversations look a little bit different right now. But I agree, like trying to be as honest as possible in an age appropriate way. I understand that children, in their brain development cannot separate their identity from their parentage. So I'm not going to berate that other person. I don't waste my energy on that anyways, but especially with my child, because I understand the direct impact that has. And even recently, my child asked me questions about that person and wanting to know like the bad things about them. And what I told them is that because I'm also a person of faith, I said, I believe that all human beings are children of God. And this person was a creation of God. And while they made choices that are not what Jesus would have us do, there are good things about that person. I said, the beautiful eyes you have, they came from that person. And I'm so grateful for that. So I said, there are things that are beautiful about that person that exist in you because God made them that way. Now, their choices, that was not God. Those were choices, you know, and those are things I talk about with my child because my child does sometimes, given their neurodivergence, have a hard time sometimes separating guilt and shame for Brene Brown fans out there. So talking about like, you are always a good person and sometimes you make mistakes. We all do.
Can I just say how much I love that you both are really leading by example, having hard conversations with your kids? I think there are a lot of folks who maybe shy away because they don't know how to, or they think, and I've had parents say this to me, like, oh, my child isn't old enough. Yeah. And I'm like,
If they're old enough to ask the questions, they're old enough.
Yes.
ooh, say that again.
No, seriously, if they're old enough to ask the questions, they're old enough to be explained in some way.
That can I steal that? And
Absolutely.
use
And
that?
that's applicable to all parenting,
Yes.
you know?
Yes,
So
it
like when
is.
it comes to like personal hygiene or
Yes.
how other people have their business or religion, if they're old enough to ask the question, then in an age appropriate way, they're old enough to have the conversation.
So it is. I mean, it is possible, and that's what I have always told parents. You can have an age-appropriate conversation, really about anything,
Yes.
and that's so important. But I also love the micro lesson that you gave us on consent. I mean, if I could just carry around a soapbox with me, just labeled consent, I would get on it every day. I just like that is just so incredible. We talk about that in my house too, like, you know, and personal space and respecting boundaries, and that is so important to helping young people grow up to understand how to care for themselves and how to have healthy relationships.
Absolutely.
I love that so much.
Absolutely. And I think there's like compounded factors as well. Like my child who is impacted by this is a girl. And I know for myself, my socialization as a girl was be nice, be a people pleaser, don't upset people. So I didn't really have a vocabulary, let alone a skill set for how to, you know, protect my body when I was a young woman. And because I didn't want to upset people, you know, and I hadn't had the practice, you know, so when I entered like the world of dating and other things as an adult, it was really hard for me to be able to set those boundaries. And I don't want that for my children, you know, and then I also layer on other things like my children are children of color. So while I'm white, my children are of mixed ethnicity. And so there's also compounding factors there because we know, for example, women of color are more impacted by abuse and assault than their white counterparts. So all that is to say, not that it doesn't matter for us white folks, it does. But I want to think of those lenses because there are more complicated factors that arise for my children as a result of, you know, the system we live in.
I would love to bring you both back and let's just do a whole episode on like healthy parenting. I mean, I love like what you're doing. You know, you're working with Victory Mission and folks recovering from abuse and really having that conversation with your young person so they can see like, oh, here's what this looks like. Here's what it looks like to recover. You're teaching consent. And I mean, this is just like, it's amazing. And I love that. My next question, I'm curious, and I feel like you both have touched on this in ways throughout this conversation, but I'm curious and love to hear from each of you. what as you were getting out or after you got out, like what was your source maybe of greatest support? What was the thing that helped you the most?
My parents, I ended up living with them for 6 months. It was difficult, but we made it. I also went to the victim center and got counseling for me and my child. Um, they were definitely a help with that. And really some friends of mine from church, not necessarily the church itself, although they weren't unhelpful, but I had friends that were really stuck by me very
Mm.
much. My mom, though, honestly, she went to every court hearing with me, and it was no joke, at least once a month. The court system does not protect survivors. I had to sit in a courtroom with him for the ex parte multiple months in a row. I had to go to because there was criminal charges because of what he had done. I had to go through all of those. Thankfully, he was already in jail when I went through for my divorce hearing, and they refused to bring him over from the jail. So I didn't have to sit in the room with him for that. But every other one for a good year, I was at the courthouse for at least once a month for an entire year with him in the same room. His lawyer trying to blow apart everything I was saying. I mean, it just yeah, it yes.
Unfortunately, I don't think that's a rare occurrence.
No.
Yeah, that sounds very much like my experience as well with court. Um, I mean, I think when I left, it's similar to Joy. You kind of almost have to like build your own like pathway that like works best for you because it kind of depends on like what brings you joy, but what draws you back to who you are as yourself. Certainly, my parents were an amazing resource. I'm very fortunate for them, in particular, my mother. But I lived a couple states away, so I didn't have the ability to bring my parents to court with me like that. I had Mujeres Unidas, which was like Harmony House, and they had an advocate that would go with me to court for every hearing, so I wouldn't be alone, which was really, 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 really helpful. I just can't say that enough because it is so scary to be in that place, especially because I'm not somebody who has a criminal history. I don't go to court. Like, this is not my thing. And then I'm there with somebody who has done horrific things to me, and to talk about those things. So, the having an advocate in court is so, 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 so crucial for me. And then also, I had a very supportive workplace. I found a church at the time that was just very supportive and loving to my child and I, and never asked me questions about, well, where's the father or where's your,
Mm.
so like never asked me those questions, which I really appreciate because I wasn't ready to talk about them. Um, and then I think once I moved back up here, I think again, like finding what that niche was for us. I know like I really wanted my child to be connected to their cultural roots. So I got connected to Grupo Latinoamericano, and I can't say enough about that organization. I love them so much. And I felt like it opened the doorways to friendships for my child, friendships for me. I ultimately was on the board there. That's where I met my husband. So, like, finding places where you feel close, where you feel like you don't have to be answering questions. You don't have to be something other than who you are. And I like that I get to share what I want to, and the rest I don't have to. That's not something that much of the world affords us as survivors. So, finding those spaces, oh boy, that's what really helped me.
I love that for both of you. We say all the time, an educated community is a safer community. And it sounds like you both have had some really great folks in your lives who were supportive, and I wish that for everyone. As we begin to wrap up this conversation, I just have two more questions for each of you. What would you say to the person watching or listening to this who maybe is still in their situation or has just gotten out? What would you say to that person?
That it is possible to make it out. That um, it's difficult. The brain fog is there, the stress, but there are people out there that do believe in you and will help you through it.
I love that. I will piggyback on that and say you deserve to live a life with freedom and love. You deserve to be yourself. And you don't have to live a life where somebody tells you who you are. And you deserve the chance to do that. It's not going to be easy, but you deserve it. And you never know what you're capable of until you try. Try to find your way. And there are people in this community who care about you and who are ready to support you at Harmony House, at the Family Justice Center, at the Victim Center. You are not alone.
Okay, last question. What brings you joy now? Let's start with you, Kate.
Joy brings me joy. And I do sincerely mean that because we both volunteer with the Family Justice Center's Voices Committee, which is comprised of survivors who inform on things we can do to better help in the community. And that brings me so much joy. But I mean, honestly, one of the things I remember saying when I was going through my divorce is like, I just want this boring, predictable life. And I feel like I've achieved the boring, predictable life I wanted, which is like, brings me so much joy. I know I'm going to work. I know I got my
living
kids.
her dreams. She's
I
a
am
boring,
living
the
the
boring mom
dream.
life. Yeah.
I am like the anti-influencer. Like, I don't need all the
She's
glitz and
de-influencing.
glitz. Yeah, nope. Because you live a life for so many years where you don't get to decide how that day goes.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm like, oh, I love that. Like, I know where I'm going to be at this time, and I know I'm going to be with my kids, and I know I'm going to be with my husband, and I know I'm going to do my job. And that brings me joy. And I do, my full-time job is with a national nonprofit that supports educational equity. So that brings me a lot of joy, a job I really love. My kids are a hoot. My husband is like the most amazing man I've ever met. I'm a little biased, you know. He's just such an incredible person and partner and father and to both of our kids. And so just the simple things bring me joy. Being able to go work out with my daughter this morning, being able to go walk at the park and not be worrying about, can I go home and sleep tonight? Simple things like that.
You know, I love that so much. Just listening to you talk about that, like that, the simplicity and the stability in those routines, that to me, that's cozy.
Yes.
I love the Danish art of cozy living, hygge. Like you're living a hygge life.
Yes. And that, I
Hashtag goals.
dreamed it and I made it, like I manifested it. I made it happen.
Yeah.
Yep.
What about you, Joy? What brings you joy at this point in your life?
Watching my son grow up, it's sad, but it's also happy to watch him achieve his goals. I also really love the fact that I'm able to work with survivors. I teach classes on forgiveness and boundaries, trust, and watching them. And because of the work I do at the church with people in recovery, watching that light come on in their eyes, watching them realize that there is a different path for their life than they thought. There's through this whole thing, watching them realize that they can succeed as well. That truly just makes my heart just overflow, watching other people be able to realize truly that there is something different out there than what they thought was.
Well, thank you so much. This has been a beautiful and inspiring conversation. I know our community is a better place with both of you in it. And so thank you for being with me on the podcast, for sharing your stories and your wisdom. And I hope that this wasn't too scary and you'll do it again.
For sure, anytime.
Not scary, and you won't keep us quiet.
If you or someone you know needs help, you are not alone. There are many resources in this community, and Harmony House is one of them. Feel free to reach out to our 24/7 hotline, 417-864-SAFE, 417-864-7233, or chat live 24/7 with an advocate through our website at myharmonyhouse.org. Thanks for joining us.